The 6 coalition vessels descended through Earth's atmosphere in perfect hexagonal formation, their hulls gleaming like polished obsidian against the clear blue sky. On the ground below, hastily assembled delegations from 17 nations waited with a mixture of awe, hope, and barely concealed terror. Military forces stood at high alert worldwide, fingers hovering over launch buttons and safeties disengaged on millions of weapons. Ambassador Zevnar of the Galactic Coalition adjusted his atmospheric filter and studied the briefing one final time. The bipeds of Sol 3 had been observed sporadically for centuries, but always from a distance. Their propensity for violence had kept the Coalition, anthropologists fascinated, and the Security Council concerned. Still, protocol demanded that any species achieving rudimentary spaceflight be evaluated for potential membership or, at minimum, trade relations. Remember, Zevnar addressed his delegation, these humans have never encountered unified species before. Their historical records indicate extreme xenophobia and territoriality. Our appearance alone may trigger primitive responses. Security Chief Mokhtor clicked his mandibles in what passed for a laugh among the Krell. That's why we're landing in this neutral territory rather than one of their power centers. The Sahara provides open sight lines and minimal civilian presence. Zevnar nodded, his elongated head bobbing slightly as the ship settled onto the desert sand. The demonstration of power is authorized, but keep it brief. Disable their global communications for no more than 30 seconds, enough to make our technological superiority clear without appearing overtly hostile. The delegation emerged into the harsh sunlight to find the human representatives arranged in a semicircle. Military personnel stood behind diplomats, their weapons visible but lowered. A human female stepped forward, her dark skin glistening with perspiration in the desert heat. On behalf of the United Nations of Earth, I welcome you to our world, she began, her voice carrying across the sand. I am Secretary General Amara Okafor. Zevnar raised his four-fingered hand in the coalition greeting of peace. We come representing the Galactic Coalition, a union of 7 spacefaring species dedicated to mutual prosperity and the advancement of sentient life. The exchange proceeded cautiously for 17 minutes. Humans asked predictable questions about coalition intentions. Coalition members inquired about Earth's governmental structures. The tension remained palpable but controlled, until Security Chief Mokhtor activated the planned demonstration. Without warning, every electronic device on Earth went silent. Military communications, civilian networks, power grids, all disabled simultaneously by the Coalition's electromagnetic dampening field. The effect was supposed to last 30 seconds. It lasted 27. That was all it took. Panic erupted across the globe. In the command centers of 7 nations, the sudden loss of communication was interpreted as a first strike. Defense protocols activated automatically. At the landing site, the human honor guard raised their weapons instinctively as alarms began blaring from emergency systems coming back online. Mokhtor's security team, seeing armed humans moving into position, opened fire with non-lethal suppression weapons. The energy pulses struck 3 human soldiers, dropping them to the ground in convulsions. The remaining military personnel responded with automatic weapons fire. Secretary General Okafor screamed for a ceasefire, but her voice was lost in the chaos. A coalition security officer fell, blue ichor spraying from his thoracic cavity. Ambassador Zevnar took a bullet through his secondary respiratory chamber. The firefight lasted less than 2 minutes. When it ended, 17 humans lay dead or dying on the desert floor. 3 coalition members, including Zevnar's chief cultural liaison, had been killed by primitive ballistic weapons. Return to the ships, Mokhtor ordered, dragging the wounded ambassador across the sand. Emergency evacuation protocols. Now. From orbit, the Coalition Supreme Commander watched the disaster unfold through remote feeds. His decision was swift, and to his mind, merciful. Designate Sol System as Prohibited Zone Category 5. No further contact authorized without Supreme Council approval. As the Coalition ships vanished into hyperspace, they remained unaware of the damaged scout vessel that had been caught in a feedback loop from Earth's primitive but surprisingly effective radar systems. The small ship, its navigation compromised, tumbled out of formation and began a long, uncontrolled descent toward the frozen Antarctic continent. Earth's first contact had lasted less than one standard planetary rotation. Its consequences would echo for centuries. Dr. Amara Okafor's breath crystallized in the frigid air of the underground facility. 50 years had passed since that fateful day in the Sahara. She had been just a junior physicist then, watching the disaster unfold on television like everyone else. Now, at 73, she stood before the assembled military and scientific leadership of the United Earth Coalition, a governing body that wouldn't have existed without the alien threat. The material composition defies conventional physics, she explained, gesturing to the holographic display showing the molecular structure of the alien alloy. It's not just the tensile strength, which is remarkable, but how it interacts with electromagnetic fields. General Santos leaned forward, his weathered face illuminated by the blue glow of the display. In plain language, Doctor, some of us missed advanced quantum mechanics at the Academy. Amara smiled patiently. They don't build ships the way we do. We assemble parts and connect them. They grow their technology, not biologically like the living ships we've observed at the edge of our system, but through a process of molecular programming. The materials respond to specific energy frequencies and reconfigure themselves. The Antarctic discovery had changed everything. After the Coalition ships departed, Earth's nations had teetered on the brink of war, each blaming others for the diplomatic catastrophe. Then came the detection of an energy signature from the southern ice shelf. What they found there, a mostly intact alien scout vessel, unified humanity like nothing in history ever had. The reverse engineering process has given us generational leaps, continued Dr. Okafor's colleague, Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura. Our antimatter containment fields are now stable at 97% efficiency, higher than what we've deciphered from their own systems. Admiral Chen, head of the newly formed Space Defense Force, tapped his tablet. What about the stealth capabilities? That's what really matters if we're going to expand beyond our system without alerting them. Dr. Nakamura nodded to a young engineer seated at the end of the table. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez has made the breakthrough there. Rodriguez stood, her nervous energy palpable. The Coalition ships employ a basic sensor deflection system, essentially advanced electronic countermeasures. But we've taken it further by adapting metamaterial principles to create true optical and electromagnetic invisibility. Stunned silence filled the room. You're saying, Admiral Chen finally spoke, that we can build ships that are actually invisible to their detection systems. Not just their systems, Rodriguez clarified. All known detection methods. The Scouts database contained information on various species sensor technologies. We've designed our stealth systems to counter all of them simultaneously. General Santos leaned back, a rare smile crossing his face. They think we're primitives with rockets and nuclear weapons. They have no idea what we've become. On the massive view screen dominating the wall, a live feed showed the UNSC Defiance receiving its final components in the lunar shipyards. Earth's first true interstellar warship represented the culmination of 50 years of secret development. One question remains, President Garcia said, breaking her silence. Do we announce ourselves to the galactic community or maintain our invisibility advantage? Dr. Okafor's eyes remained fixed on the growing warship. The Coalition deemed us too dangerous to join their community. Perhaps they were right, but for the wrong reasons. We should observe before revealing ourselves. Admiral Chen nodded. The Defiance is equipped for deep reconnaissance. Captain Reyes and her crew are prepared for a 5-year mission to map Coalition space and assess potential threats. And if they discover threats? Asked the President. Then humanity will be ready, Chen replied. The Defiance is a reconnaissance vessel, yes, but it's also the most advanced warship ever created by human hands, or perhaps any hands in the galaxy. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Okafor remained, watching the shipyard feed. The Coalition had abandoned Earth, thinking humanity would remain trapped in its cradle forever. They would learn their mistake soon enough. Admiral Krav of the Threll Dominion stood 7 feet tall on his hind limbs, his exoskeleton gleaming with ceremonial oils applied for battle. 4 compound eyes surveyed the tactical hologram dominating the command deck of the Apex Predator, flagship of the invasion fleet. The Coalition forces are retreating from the outer defense perimeter, reported Sub-Commander Vex, her mandibles clicking with excitement. Their formation is breaking. Krav chittered in satisfaction. The Coalition had ruled unopposed for too long. Their technology was impressive, but their tactics were stagnant, predictable. The Threll had spent generations preparing for this moment, breeding their bioships in secret, each vessel a living weapon evolved for specific combat roles. The Hive carriers have breached the third moon, Vex continued. Deployment of hunter swarms is underway. On the display, thousands of small attack craft, each containing 3 Threll warriors neurally linked to their vessel, swarmed from the massive carrier ships. Unlike mechanical ships, these bioships healed themselves during battle, adapting to enemy attack patterns with each engagement. The Coalition always expected us to attack their core worlds first, Krav mused, pacing the organic command platform. They never considered we might strike at a minor system like Proxima Centauri. It holds little strategic value, agreed Vex, but its fall will demonstrate the Coalition's inability to protect its peripheral territories. Krav's attention shifted to a Coalition cruiser attempting to evacuate civilians from the research outpost on the system's 4th planet. The ship was elegant, its design emphasizing harmony and efficiency, like everything the Coalition built. It was also completely unsuited for the chaos of actual combat against an unexpected enemy. Target the evacuation vessel, Krav ordered. I want the Coalition to watch their civilians die while their military retreats. 3 hunter swarm vessels broke formation, accelerating toward the vulnerable cruiser. The Coalition ship's energy shields flickered as they diverted power to their engines, sacrificing defense for speed. They always choose the same, Krav chittered. Always the same patterns, the same. Admiral. Tactical Officer Milnar's voice cut through the command deck chatter, her usual composure shattered. Unknown contact at bearing 340 Mark 25, approaching at high velocity. Krav turned sharply. Coalition reinforcements. Negative. Milnar's claws danced across her control surface. Configuration unknown. Weapons unknown. It matches no known ship design in our database. The holographic display shifted, showing a vessel unlike anything Krav had seen. Where Coalition ships were elegant curves and symmetry, this ship was angular, utilitarian, bristling with what appeared to be weapon emplacements. Where Threll bioships pulsed with the visible signatures of living tissue, this ship was cold, mechanical, but somehow more predatory in appearance than even the Apex Predator. Origin, demanded Krav, suddenly uneasy. Unknown, Admiral. It's not broadcasting any identification. Its approach vector suggests it originated from. Milnar paused, rechecking her readings. From the Sol system. The command deck fell silent. The Sol system was listed in Coalition records as a prohibited zone, a primitive world deemed too volatile for contact. Impossible, Krav hissed. The Sol species are primitives. They have no interstellar capability. The unknown ship suddenly accelerated, its velocity exceeding any Coalition vessel. It was headed directly toward the hunter swarms attacking the evacuation cruiser. Admiral. Milnar's voice rose in alarm as every scanner on the command deck flashed urgent red warnings. The vessel is powering weapons unlike anything in our database. Energy signatures suggest. The tactical display erupted in light as the unknown ship opened fire. 2 hunter swarms simply ceased to exist, while the third spun away, leaking atmosphere and biological fluids. Krav stood transfixed as alerts screamed across the command deck. After centuries of preparation, After countless simulations of coalition responses, the Threll Dominion faced something entirely unexpected. All vessels, Krav finally ordered, his voice deadly calm. Target the unknown ship, Priority Alpha. I want it destroyed. And if possible, I want salvageable remains for study. Throughout the Threll fleet, scanners flashed red. A human warship had entered the battlefield. Stealth systems at maximum efficiency. We remain undetected by Coalition long-range scanners. Lieutenant Park's voice was steady despite the tension gripping the bridge of the UNSC Defiance. Captain Alina Reyes nodded, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. For 3 years, the Defiance had conducted its reconnaissance mission without incident, mapping Coalition space, monitoring communications, and gathering intelligence on the various species that formed the galactic community. They had observed trade routes, studied defense patterns, and compiled a comprehensive database on Coalition technology. Not once had they been detected. Today was supposed to be a routine observation of the Proxima Centauri system, the closest star to Earth's sun and home to a small Coalition research outpost. Instead, they had jumped into the middle of an invasion. Multiple bioships detected, reported Tactical Officer Chen. Configuration doesn't match any Coalition vessel designs. They appear to be organic in nature. Commander Jackson stroked his beard, a nervous habit he'd never managed to break. Those aren't Coalition ships. They're attacking Coalition positions. Confirmed, Chen nodded. The attacking fleet is designated as Threll in Coalition emergency broadcasts. They're overwhelming Coalition defenses on all fronts. Reyes studied the battle unfolding before them. The Defiance had maintained its position at the edge of the system, stealth systems rendering them invisible to both sides of the conflict. Their orders were explicit: observe and report without revealing humanity's technological advancement. Captain, Communications Officer Rodriguez's voice was tight. I'm picking up distress calls from the 4th planet. There's a research station with civilian personnel. Coalition evacuation efforts are being targeted by those smaller attack craft. On the main view screen, they watched as 3 predatory vessels broke from the main Threll formation, accelerating toward a Coalition cruiser loaded with civilian evacuees. Estimated survival probability for the evacuation vessel? Reyes asked. Lieutenant Chen checked his calculations twice. 0%, Captain. Their shields are failing, and they've diverted power from weapons to engines. They won't survive the upcoming attack. A heavy silence fell across the bridge. Every officer knew their orders. Every officer also knew what was at stake. The first revelation of humanity's presence in interstellar space would change everything. How many civilians on that cruiser? Reyes asked quietly. Coalition life sign readings indicate approximately 473 non-combatants, Rodriguez replied. Mostly scientists and their families. Commander Jackson stepped closer to the captain's chair. Elena, he said softly, using her first name for the first time in years. If we intervene, we reveal ourselves not just to the Coalition, but to these Threll as well. Earth has remained safe precisely because we've stayed hidden. Captain Reyes stood, her decision made. Humanity didn't come this far by hiding while innocents are slaughtered. Her voice carried across the bridge with calm authority. Navigation. Plot an intercept course to position us between those attack craft and the evacuation vessel. Tactical, ready kinetic penetrators, and prepare to deploy AEGIS defense drones. The bridge erupted into controlled activity as the Defiance prepared for its first combat engagement. What about stealth systems, Captain? Lieutenant Park asked. Divert all power from stealth to engines and weapons, Reyes ordered. If we're doing this, we're doing it with everything we've got. The Defiance surged forward, its advanced engines flaring with power as it abandoned concealment. Across the system, Coalition and Threll sensors suddenly detected the unknown vessel accelerating toward the battle. Open a channel, Reyes commanded. All frequencies. Rodriguez looked up in surprise. To whom, Captain? A grim smile crossed Reyes' face. To everyone. If humanity is announcing its presence to the galaxy today, let's make sure they hear us clearly. She straightened her uniform and faced the communications pickup. This is Captain Elena Reyes of the Earth vessel UNSC Defiance to all combatants. The targeting of civilian evacuation efforts stops now. Admiral Thervek had served the Coalition for 173 standard cycles. He had quelled pirate insurgencies in the city expanse, negotiated peace with the mercurial voidborn of Ta Ceti, and personally commanded the last fleet action against the Hegemony Rebellion 40 cycles ago. None of that had prepared him for what he was witnessing now. "Magnify Sector 7, he ordered, his four-fingered hand trembling slightly as he pointed at the tactical display. The unknown vessel, this Defiance from Earth, moved like nothing he had ever seen. Coalition ships relied on elegant, predictable trajectories, their movements calculated to 6 decimal places before execution. Threll bioships were more erratic, but still followed recognizable attack patterns evolved over generations of warfare. This human ship seemed to defy physics itself. "It can't maintain those turns at that velocity," muttered Science Officer Zexera. "The structural integrity should fail. The crew should be crushed by acceleration forces." Yet the Defiance banked impossibly tight, evading a barrage of Threll bioplasma while simultaneously deploying what appeared to be autonomous defense drones. The drones, each barely larger than a Coalition escape pod, formed a protective screen around the damaged civilian evacuation cruiser. Their weapons, Tactical Officer Venler's voice was hushed with disbelief. "They're not using energy beams or plasma." On the display, the Defiance fired again. There was no energy signature, no radiation burst, just solid projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds. The first Threll Hunter swarm vessel simply disappeared, converted to expanding debris by the kinetic impact. The second suffered a glancing blow that tore away its sensory cluster, sending it spinning helplessly. "We're intercepting their communications," reported Communications Officer Nezrin. "But our translation matrix is struggling. They're using references we don't understand." Admiral Thervek leaned forward as the human communications echoed through the command deck. "Executing Thermopylae maneuver now," came a calm human voice. "All hands brace for Magellan sequence." "What is a Thermopylae?" demanded Thervek. His cultural liaison officer consulted her database. "Unknown, Admiral. Possibly a tactical formation." Their communications also referenced something called Trafalgar and Incheon landing. On the display, the Defiance executed a complex series of maneuvers that placed it directly in the path of the Threll flagship's main battery. The massive bioship fired, its graviton lance striking the human vessel squarely amidships. For a moment, Tharvek thought it was over. No ship could withstand a direct hit from a graviton lance. But as the energy dissipated, the Defiance remained, its hull glowing with dispersed energy. A section of its outer armor had been completely sheared away, exposing internal compartments to space. "They should retreat now," Zexer said. "Their structural integrity is compromised." Instead, emergency bulkheads sealed within the human ship. Damaged sections were jettisoned in a controlled manner, the debris carefully aimed to collide with approaching Threll vessels. And then, impossibly, the Defiance accelerated, driving directly toward the Threll flagship. "They're increasing power to weapons," Venlor reported in disbelief. "They're not retreating. They're pressing the attack." A Threll boarding craft managed to latch onto the Defiance's damaged section. Coalition observers watched, expecting the human vessel to take evasive action or surrender the breached compartment. What happened instead would be discussed in Coalition tactical academies for generations. The external camera showed human crew members in armored environmental suits meeting the Threll boarders not with retreat, but with coordinated close-quarters combat. Where Coalition doctrine dictated abandonment of breached sections, these humans advanced into the breach. "What species fights like this?" whispered Nezrin. Admiral Thervek had no answer. In all his long service, he had never witnessed such a combination of technological sophistication and raw combat ferocity. As he watched the Defiance continue its improbable battle against overwhelming odds, a disturbing thought occurred to him. The Coalition had designated Sol a prohibited system, not out of contempt, but out of fear. Perhaps they had been right to do so. The emergency summit aboard the Coalition command station, Harmony, was unprecedented in galactic history. Representatives from all 7 Coalition species gathered in the Grand Council chamber, their usual ceremonial greetings abandoned in the face of crisis. At the center of the chamber stood a human woman in a uniform unlike any the Coalition had seen before. Fleet Admiral Yuki Yamamoto, Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces, stood calmly before the Coalition leadership. At 62, her weathered face bore the subtle marks of cellular regeneration therapy, another human advancement reverse-engineered from Coalition technology. She had spent 40 years preparing for this moment, though she had never expected it would come during a war. "You concealed your technological advancement," accused Supreme Commander Zinfar, his translucent skin pulsing with agitation. "You violated the quarantine directive." "As you violated our sovereignty," Yamamoto replied evenly. "Your directive was not binding on us, as we never consented to it." The Defiance's intervention at Proxima Centauri had changed everything. The damaged but still operational human vessel had not only saved the civilian transport, but had held off Threll forces long enough for Coalition reinforcements to arrive. Captain Rice and her crew were now heroes to the Coalition civilians, and a diplomatic nightmare for the Coalition leadership. "The Threll advance continues on 3 fronts," stated Admiral Tharvek, displaying the tactical situation on the chamber's holographic projector. "At current rates of attrition, the Coalition will lose control of 17 systems within 30 standard cycles." The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. Coalition species communicated simultaneously through various methods: verbal, pheromonal, and electromagnetic, creating a cacophony of alarm that human translators struggle to process. "We formally request Earth's assistance," said Zinfar, the words clearly painful for him to pronounce. Admiral Yamamoto nodded. "Earth stands ready to help." She activated her own holographic projector. "I have been authorized to deploy our available fleet immediately." The display showed 20 ships, each different in design, but all bearing the distinctive angular, utilitarian aesthetic of human military vessels. Coalition tactical officers studied the specifications with growing excitement. "These vessels are unusual," noted a Krell weapons analyst. "Each appears to be a unique design. We don't build in standardized classes," explained Commander Sarah Okafor, the Admiral's chief technical officer and granddaughter of Dr. Amara Okafor. "Each ship reflects the tactical philosophy and technological specialization of its nation of origin." The Coalition officers watched in confusion as human captains joined the briefing remotely, debating tactics openly and sometimes heatedly. They argued over approach vectors, weapons deployment, and resource allocation with a passion that shocked the Coalition representatives. "You permit such dissent in your command structure?" asked a horrified Coalition tactician. Commander Jackson of the Defiance, now participating via hologram from the medical bay where he was recovering from injuries, actually laughed. "We don't just permit it, we require it. The graveyards of Earth are filled with generals who couldn't adapt because no one questioned their orders." Gradually, a joint strategy emerged from the human discussions. While the Coalition's elegant battle plans typically involved perfect coordination and synchronized movements, the human approach embraced controlled chaos and tactical flexibility. "Each ship will have primary and secondary objectives," Admiral Yamamoto explained, "but captains are authorized to adapt to battlefield conditions as needed." "Without central coordination?" asked Admiral Tharvek incredulously. "With coordination, but not micromanagement," Yamamoto clarified. "You fought the Threll for 3 months with perfect formation and predictable responses. How has that worked for you?" The question hung in the air, unanswered but understood by all. Coalition doctrine had failed against an enemy that didn't follow expected patterns. "Perhaps," suggested Zinfar carefully, What we need is an approach the Thrall cannot anticipate because we ourselves would never have conceived it." For the first time, Admiral Yamamoto smiled. That, Commander, is humanity's specialty. Dr. Sarah Okafor stood in the medical bay of the Coalition science vessel Enlightenment, watching in fascination as the alien regeneration field knitted together the shattered bones in Lieutenant Chen's leg. The young tactical officer from the Defiance had been injured during a Thrall boarding action, yet would walk again in days rather than months. "The cellular stimulation rate is remarkable," she murmured, recording observations on her tablet. "Our own regeneration tech derived from the Antarctic ship is primitive by comparison." Beside her, Coalition Medical Officer Wendler's skin shifted through shades of blue, their species' indication of professional satisfaction. "Your adaptation of our technology is impressive despite your limited understanding. You achieved in decades what took us centuries." 2 months into the Human Coalition alliance, both sides were still adjusting to each other's methods and capabilities. Across the ship, similar exchanges were taking place. Coalition engineers examined human vessel designs with equal parts admiration and horror. "You channeled antimatter through a magnetic bottle with these safeguards?" asked Chief Engineer Maltek, aghast as he studied the schematics of the Defiance's power core. Commander Rodriguez shrugged. "We needed the power, and we needed it yesterday. Our entire engineering philosophy is built on calculated risk." The knowledge exchange revealed uncomfortable truths on both sides. Humans learned they had developed in a galactic backwater because their star's unique radiation signature had masked them from early surveys. The Coalition learned that humanity's fractious nature, which they had dismissed as primitive, had driven innovation at a pace their consensus-based civilization couldn't match. In the Tactical Center, Dr. Maya Singh, a human anthropologist specializing in predatory species psychology, worked with Coalition scientists to analyze captured Thrall specimens and communication records. "They're not just predators," she explained, pointing to patterns in Thrall communication signals. "They're trophy hunters. Each of you is a prestigious kill to mark their status." Coalition scientist Zexor's bony ridges flared with alarm. "You determined this from just 3 days of observation." Dr. Singh nodded. "Humans have spent millennia studying predatory behavior, both animal and our own. We recognize the patterns." Coalition scientists were disturbed by how quickly humans grasped the psychology of violence, but couldn't deny the tactical advantage it provided. For the first time, Coalition forces could anticipate Thrall attack patterns based on their status-seeking behavior rather than conventional military logic. In the ship's recreational area, a concept Coalition vessels had never included before, human and Coalition personnel gathered to share stories and build the trust necessary for joint operations. Captain Alina Reyes of the Defiance, now recovered from her injuries, found herself explaining Earth history to fascinated aliens. "You fought 2 global wars?" asked a young Coalition officer, their feathery sensory organs quivering with distress. "Against yourselves." "We did," Reyes acknowledged. "Devastating conflicts that nearly destroyed our civilization. But from those ashes came our greatest advancements, not just in technology, but in how we govern ourselves." Across the table, Admiral Thervek listened quietly. "The Coalition has known peace for so long. We forgot what it means to adapt. Our tactics remained unchanged for generations because they were never truly challenged." Later that evening, in a private meeting with human and Coalition leadership, the true scale of the knowledge exchange was assessed. "The Thrall came close to overwhelming us because we had grown complacent," admitted Supreme Commander Zinfar. "We built perfect weapons but forgot the unpredictability of warfare." Admiral Yamamoto nodded. "And humans advanced rapidly precisely because we never stopped competing with ourselves. Our greatest strength and weakness are the same. We never stop pushing boundaries, even when it's dangerous." As discussions concluded, Dr. Okafor found herself alone in the observation deck with her counterpart, Chief Scientist Nevilar. Below them, a combined human coalition fleet prepared for the counteroffensive against the Threll. "We feared you," admitted Nevlar softly. "When our first contact team reported back about your world, they described a species too volatile, too aggressive for safe contact." "They weren't entirely wrong," Okafor replied, "but they failed to see the other side of that coin. Our capacity to channel that same determination toward creation rather than destruction. The price of knowledge was high for both civilizations. Humanity confronted its relative youth in the cosmos, while the Coalition faced uncomfortable truths about their stagnation. But as their ships moved together toward Threll space, both species understood that neither could have prevailed alone. The combined fleet entered Threll space with humanity in the vanguard. Coalition ships maintained perfect formation in the center, their elegant designs gleaming against the void. Human vessels ranged ahead and along the flanks, their movements seemingly erratic but coordinated through a battle language the Threll could not decipher. On the bridge of the Defiance, now repaired and upgraded with Coalition technology, Captain Rice studied the tactical display as they approached the Threll homeworld. What had begun as a desperate intervention to save civilians had escalated into a full-scale war that would determine the fate of 3 civilizations. "Multiple contacts ahead," reported Lieutenant Chen from his tactical station. His leg, healed by Coalition medical technology, showed no signs of his previous injury. "Threll defensive fleet is moving to intercept. All ships, execute Agincourt Protocol," ordered Admiral Yamamoto from the fleet command vessel Humanity. The human ships immediately broke formation, redistributing themselves in what appeared to be random patterns, but actually created overlapping fields of fire. The Threll fleet, nearly 3 times the size of the Allied forces, approached with predatory confidence. Their bioships pulsed with aggressive energy signatures, the living vessels eager for combat after generations of breeding for war. "They still think they're the apex predators," Commander Jackson observed quietly. Rice nodded. "Let's show them they're wrong." The human fleet initiated the attack with a tactic the Coalition had initially dismissed as wasteful: simultaneous electromagnetic pulse bursts combined with graviton disruption fields. The effect on the bioships was immediate and devastating. The living vessels, dependent on neural connections and bioelectrical systems, convulsed as their internal communications were disrupted. "Coalition forces, advance and engage," came Admiral Tharvek's order. The elegant Coalition vessels moved forward in perfect synchronization, their weapons specifically recalibrated based on human analysis of Threll biological weaknesses. The space around the Threll homeworld erupted in battle. Where previous engagements had seen the Coalition retreat before Threll swarm tactics, now the combined fleet fought with a hybrid approach that left the Threll unable to adapt. Human unpredictability complemented Coalition precision in a deadly dance that pushed the Threll back toward their homeworld. On the Threll command vessel, Supreme Hunter Krav watched with growing disbelief as his forces faltered. "How?" he demanded of his tactical officers. "How are they anticipating our moves?" The answer came in a direct communication request from the Allied fleet. Against his advisor's warnings, Krav accepted the transmission. The holographic projector displayed Admiral Yamamoto and Admiral Tharvek standing side by side, a sight that until recently would have been unthinkable. "This is Admiral Yamamoto of Earth and Admiral Tharvek of the Coalition," the human began. "We offer you one opportunity to surrender and withdraw to your original territories." Krav's mandibles clicked in agitation. "You were not known to us," he hissed, addressing the human. "Had we known such worthy prey existed, we would have hunted you first." Admiral Yamamoto stepped forward, her expression calm but resolute. "That's where you made your mistake," she replied. "You see yourselves as hunters. We remember being both hunter and hunted. We remember starving in winters and being stalked by predators. We remember building our first walls not to keep our enemies out, but to keep the beasts at bay." She leaned closer to the projection. "Humanity crawled up from the mud with teeth at our heels. We know what it means to be prey, to be hunted, and we vowed never to feel that fear again. Supreme Hunter Krov studied the human with new understanding. The Threll had evolved as apex predators, never experiencing the formative pressure of being prey. They had never developed the desperate innovation that came from fighting for survival against superior forces. And what of the Coalition? Krov demanded. They have been neither predator nor prey for millennia. Admiral Tharvek's translucent skin pulsed with conviction. We have learned what you never did. That strength comes not from perfection, but from adaptation. From humans, we have remembered what it means to evolve rather than simply refine. The transmission ended, and the final battle for the Threll homeworld began in earnest. Smaller human vessels executed precision strikes against breeding facilities, while coalition ships held the line against Threll counterattacks. When Krov's flagship attempted a desperate charge toward the coalition command vessel, it was the Defiance that intercepted it, Captain Rice personally leading the boarding action that captured the Supreme Hunter. 3 days later, the formal surrender of the Threll Dominion was broadcast across coalition and human space. The terms, negotiated by both human and coalition diplomats, were firm but not vindictive. The Threll would retain their homeworld, but lose their conquered territories and military capabilities. As the combined fleet returned victorious, their scanners no longer flashed warnings at each other's approach. Coalition vessels now registered human ships as allies, while human captains had added coalition identification codes to their recognition protocols. In the Grand Chamber of the Coalition Supreme Council, a new founding principle was added to their charter. Strength lies not in perfection, but in diversity of thought and the courage to change. And in Coalition historical archives, they mark the turning point of their civilization with 6 simple words. Their scanners flashed red. A human warship had entered the battlefield.